Hey everybody, Rick here with the word for Wednesday. Just hope everything is going well with you. If anybody out there is in North Carolina or the East, hope you're doing well. Hope your gas prices aren't going crazy. For all the rest of y'all, hope you're doing well as well. And I was just thinking today, it seems like this time of year there is something that is going on right now where there is just so much of misinformation affecting people in their thinking. It was interesting, especially like for me, I had an interesting time, having tested COVID positive, having a couple of days of symptoms, but really nothing dramatic. I was really fortunate and blessed, as was the rest of my family, as you know. And one of the things that I had just a lot of time to really kind of think through and ponder was kind of truth and perceptions of truth. Like for me, it all started with folks kind of thinking that things were just worse and more dramatic than they really were. And we were just very blessed, and things were fine. And when folks are questioning you, are you really okay? And you're like, gosh, yeah, we're good. And then when things like, folks start, I heard it said here, or I have a friend that thinks this, and there's just so much information out there that it's almost like we throw our hands up these days. Because the problem with the internet, the problem with everything we got, the problem with how readily and quickly we can access information, the problem really lies in the fact that we can trust things to be true because we want them to be true, not necessarily because they are true. See, there's truth that we get like from science and from man that we discover. And because it's not a perfect source, science is the observation and the reckoning and the finding of things that exist in this world. But, our world is a fallen world. And fallen men and women are the ones that are pursuing that information. So you're always going to kind of, like we say in the world, we kind of evolve with our information. As more information comes, it grows and we learn more. And we realize that, yes, it is true, but our limitations really keep us from seeing the scope of truth. The best example is, how God says he created the earth, and the earth is a continual state of creation. And up until late last century, we didn't have telescopes powerful enough to see the scope of how the universe is growing still, and God's creative power continues. So we caught up with God with our science and with our technology. Well, in many ways, that's what science does. It catches up with God. So when we look at what truth really is, because biblical truth is based in a source that is perfect, that is eternal, that is beyond our world. It is not in God's presence and God's power breaks into a broken world, but it is not subject to a broken world. Whereas we still live with the effects of sin, as Romans 7 and 8 clearly teach us. So what I wanted to talk about, getting back to truth, is this idea of, so what truth do we believe? Well, we believe truth that comes from wisdom that God releases on earth and through science and things like that. We believe that, especially over time as it proves itself to be true. No one's going to say that gravity is a lie because it's proven and tested over time. But the issue with us is how we test and how we trust and how we ingest and let truth live inside us. Because oftentimes we just get a little too trusting of people that say the things we want to hear instead of the truth that sets us free. So in John 8:31 through 33, there's this dispute that Jesus is kind of talking to. There's Jews that believe him and there's Jews that don't believe him. And then Jesus is kind of talking over this and teaching this crowd, and he says in verse 31, "To the Jews who have believed him, Jesus said, if you hold to my teaching, you are really my disciples. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." We are Abraham's descendants, is what they replied. They're going on the truth of their experience, whereas Jesus is talking about the truth of God, which is his very existence. So when we sort this idea of truth, when we're coming at this idea of truth, what is true, who is true, where does truth come from, we have got to realize, number one, that all truth that comes from God is inspired, is holy, is eternal. And there is truth that comes from man that is true, that is expressions of justice. We are called to function in that truth. But we need to wrestle and weigh that in light of God's perfect word and truth, and through prayer and struggle in his Spirit. See, we cannot be the people that just take anything blindly. We are the prophetic voice. Like, so here is what the world says. And we have usually something that's on one side of an issue and something that's on another side of an issue. Whereas what God is saying, these are great starting points, but I need to be involved so that we're above the issue, looking down on the issue from a heavenly, from a kingdom perspective. That is more than just taking both sides into account, but seeing where both sides fail and where God's redemptive truth stands above all this. We need to realize that so many of the people that are speaking to us all the time have agendas. No matter what side of the aisle you're on, if you're a Rachel Maddow fan or if you're a Sean Hannity fan, they have bills to pay, they have commercials, and the more you click or the more you watch, the better they do. So they are going to say the things to keep you clicking, keep you listening. Whereas God, you know what his agenda is? The restoration of the whole of mankind, the reaching into the lost and the broken, the reclamation of his creation. That's a bigger agenda. And the truth that we need to weigh is that when God comes into those situations, when God is bringing his truth, it sets us free, because it sets us free from allegiance to one or the other, and it makes us live in a place of ultimate truth. God's truth, his prophetic voice, his prophetic view over the issues of men and women is bigger than what we tend to live in. So here's my challenge. To stretch yourself. Don't just take one word or one side. Examine issues thoroughly. Look and ask the Lord, what would the other side be? What is the other side of this equation? God, where have you put truth over here for me to find that brings a more rounded and whole kingdom perspective to people and to situations? So how do we, instead of falling for misinformation, falling for what our favorite people say, how do we step above instead of fall in? How do we look beyond? Everything that God wants to do has an eternal sense to it, not just a solution that fixes the now, but an eternal sense. That is the kingdom perspective. God's kingdom perspective isn't about winning, losing, one side right, one side wrong. God's eternal perspective is about the wholeness of the presence of his kingdom, where fullness and healing, where justice and mercy reside. Folks, I want you to think about that, because when you realize that this is about a relationship with God, reaching into God's opinion of things and wholly hanging on to what he is, you become what he says in that passage in verse 31. Because to the Jew who had believed him, Jesus says, you hold my teaching. So the first step in being free is to hold the teaching. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Thank you for listening. Hope I see you soon, and make sure you kind of get around to seeing us on a Sunday. We'd love to have you. Look forward to the next time we can get together. Take care, be blessed, and hang on to that truth. It will set you free. Take care.